Hello and welcome back to another episode from Driving Britain. Today's episode is a British person reacting to an American who's reacting to British schools explained. Now, before we go any further, a couple of people have asked why we make reaction videos to reaction videos rather than, well, just a reaction video. And the truth is we do both. We have normal standard reaction videos on our channel, but occasionally we make additional videos which are reactions to reactions. And we make them for one simple reason. Every time one of us make one of these reaction videos, it tends to generate more questions than answers. And the things that we do find out about are often a little bit incomplete. The reason why we watch these types of videos is one, to see the person's reaction, but also because we actually want to know what the topic's about. You know, this video is about the differences between British and American schools to some extent, because he's watching a video on British schools and he's no doubt going to explain a little bit about American schools. But that's probably going to generate more questions, either for us as viewers or for Steve watching that video. Now, Steve is the guy who's making the video that we're reacting to, and his channel is Reacting to My Roots. Link is in description, and as always, make sure you subscribe. Okay, without anything further, let's get straight into it.
Hello guys, my name is Steve. Thank you for stopping by my channel. I'm just an American guy on a journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Today we're going to be reacting to British Schools Explained. I've been wondering for quite a while how the UK education system works, because I know it's completely different in a lot of ways from how American school system is set up. I'm wondering some of the things like, are British schools, do they have a top-down approach, or are they broke up kind of like in America, where schools are mostly funded on the local level through property taxes and whatnot? I really don't know anything about.
With UK schools, it's a bit of both. Local council, which is like, smaller parts of government that deal with their own local area. So say Manchester Council would deal with stuff within Manchester. They do get monies in from their own areas through council tax and other stuff like that, which is to be spent on, police, lighting, cleaning the roads, that sort of stuff. But it also goes towards looking after the stuff that's in their area, and that includes schools. But the main money for schools and the education system comes from government, main national government. So, it's kind of controlled in London, Westminster, in Parliament, and it's kind of sent out from there. But local councils do have some input, and they can also make applications for additional funding. Individual schools can make separate applications, but generally the education system is massively underfunded, and it's also to some extent kind of performance related. So if you've had a bad previous year, you've not had very many passes, the kids haven't done very well, there's less people qualifying and things like that, then it means that you're likely to get less funding the next year. It's meant as a carrot and stick type scenario, so that if your school does well, then the next year you get even more money. If you do well again, then the next year you get a bit more on top, and so on. But the problem is, if you start off with no real funding in the first place, then you're always going to struggle to provide even a basic educational system. So it's not a very good system, and it's self-perpetuating, because if your funding's cut or at least not increased, then the next year you're going to either be the same or worse. It's not always down to the school or the people going there. A lot of it always comes back down to the money and the amount of money that's invested. So it is a pretty dodgy system, having any type of carrot and stick sort of scenario. And I'm not sure just how popular that still is, but I know that at least a few years ago it was quite a big thing, because there's quite a lot of schools saying, well, yeah, we've got poor results, but that's because we have nothing to start with. And also, if a school is in a more deprived area, then, whether it's down to the kids that's going there, the support the kids get from their parents, or what, the bottom line is, schools in deprived areas tend to just do worse than other schools. I think there's a whole group of reasons around that, which I don't want to get into, but it means that if you are a school in that area, then you're going to get, not only are you already in a very difficult situation to start with, but then you're potentially facing funding cuts because of the situation that you're in, because of your geographic location, because of maybe the pupils that go there, and all sorts of other things. So there's a lot of parts of the system that don't work very well, but that's pretty much how it is. It's mainly controlled by main government, and that's the same for the standard of education. That's equal across the country, or at least for each country. Scotland have control of their own educational system. Same for Wales and same for England and Northern Ireland. It's all kind of outlined by main government, by London. But because Scotland and Wales are all part of the UK, but they do act to some extent independent. You have the Welsh Assembly, which is like you have Parliament in London. Same for Scotland. They can pass laws that apply to Scotland but don't apply to England. So there is local control, and they do kind of determine what goes on themselves, but it's all to the same standard. It's all pretty much on the same backbone and then fleshed out from there.
I do remember hearing in another video about, was it public school versus state school? I think you guys may call what we call public school a state school, but I'm not 100% sure. Or maybe that was a private school. I don't know. Anyway, let's go ahead and check this video out and see what we can learn about the British school system.
Hi, I'm Siobhan Thompson and this is Anglophenia. Now, many of the most beloved stories from the UK are set in schools, all the way from Tom Brown's School Days to Harry Potter and the History Boys. But the British school system is remarkably different from that in the US, so much so that it's often the first thing that Americans ask me to explain to them. So, here is the Cliff's Notes version of how the British school system works, but study up because there's going to be an exam at the end of the video. Public schools and state schools. What Americans call private schools are called public schools in the UK, and what you call public schools, we call state schools.
Wait. Okay, okay, that's not what I was thinking. Okay, I thought you called state schools what we call public schools. Oh, yeah, you do. Wait, no. Yeah, okay. Okay, what we call public schools, you guys call state schools. What we call private schools, you call public schools. That's interesting.
Yeah, how they got the name public school versus state school. Obviously, state school is pretty self-explanatory, but how it ended up being called public school for private school, I'm not really sure. I mean, you do also have academies and all sorts of other stuff like that, but generally speaking, yeah. What brought up the original names of public school and why that differs from the US or the US differs from the UK, I'm not really sure. I don't know how they ended up that way around because they are pretty much opposite. Maybe that was it. Somebody just wanted to do the exact opposite and that's how it worked. That's usually what seems to happen.
Why would a private school be called a public school? All right, here in the US, a private school is a school you go generally pay out of pocket for. I don't see any times the U.S. government is going to pay for a private school necessarily, but public schools are generally always funded by taxpayers, and that's something I'm curious about. Okay, anyway, let's continue.
There are also some private schools that don't call themselves public schools, they call themselves private or independent schools.
Okay.
But most of the ones that Americans are thinking about, where people live in a mansion and wear a very silly uniform, are called public schools. Got it? Most state schools these days are comprehensives, meaning that they accept students of every academic ability. But there was a system that's still in place in some areas of secondary modern and grammar schools. There, kids take a test at 11 to see what type of school they'll go to, the grammar schools being more academic and the secondary moderns more vocational. Church schools.
All right, hold on. I want to get that. Let's see. Hold on. Let's look at that again. Comprehensives can be a part of state schools, and those are either secondary, modern, or grammar schools. So this would be a place someone perhaps may learn to do a particular trade. That's what I'm guessing, since more vocational.
Yeah, well, kind of. It's that when you have finished middle school, so you're about to start your last 4 years at school, you're about to go off to your senior school, you'll take your 11 plus exam, which kind of sees, or is supposed to at least determine what your educational level is. Now, if you get a good score, then you might be able to go off to a slightly better, more academic orientated school. So things are, just like in classes, you get higher class and lower class and things like that, with the level of information that the kids are exposed to kind of varies depending on their ability. Well, that's pretty much how the secondary, modern and grammar school idea is pretty much put out, I guess. If you get a good score in your 11 plus, then you might be able to get to a slightly better school, a little bit more academically orientated school. the places for those schools are always a little bit in demand, so it means that they can pick and choose quite a lot, and they do pick and choose quite a lot. Secondary modern is basically the average school in the UK. Most schools will be under that sort of umbrella, and it's not that they do anything different as far as the main backbone of education goes, because that's already standard and set out by national government. What it does mean though is, say if you was at school and you would have kids that would get put up into a slightly higher tier and would learn a little bit more advanced information than the rest of the kids in the class. Well, that's the idea that would be behind most of the classes across the board in a grammar school. Whether it actually turned out like that or not, that's arguable. And also, there used to be mostly just boys' schools. Now they're more integrated, there's boys and girls, but a lot of the time, when I was at school, which wasn't that long ago, but when I took my 11 plus, or whatever the current equivalent is, the local grammar school was an all boys school, and it's pretty much run almost like a private school, but it's state funded. Not that I actually went that, I went to the secondary modern, but that's because that's where my brothers and stuff had gone to, and also a lot of my friends. So I wanted to go to the secondary modern. I didn't want to go to the grammar school, regardless of what my marks were going to be. I'd already made up my mind that I really wouldn't want to go there. And your parents are half and half in if they're going to push you into a school. If you really don't want to go somewhere, then they're not going to really penalise you, because there shouldn't be that much difference realistically between a secondary modern and a grammar. They are both working from the same educational system. They both have the same standards that they have to adhere to. And even though you should be a little bit more academically propped up, I guess, in a grammar, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the case, because they're still exposed to the same funding cuts as everybody else. And there's also a lot of people trying to get into each class.
And this is more of just, is this more advanced in a way? Is this where people would potentially kids would potentially go to school? I don't know. How do you describe a grammar school? Isn't that like the academics are more advanced or something? Wow, this is a little more complicated than I thought it would be. I thought it would just be, public and private in the US and then the equivalent over here. But then you break down what are technically public schools in the US to these other versions. Maybe that's kind of like our, what do you call it? We have, what do you call that word? I can't think of. We have a type of school that's kind of charter. We have charter schools. Now, if anybody that's from the UK knows what a charter school in the US is that what this would be?
Well, we do have schools that some all list themselves down as academies and stuff like that. I think that's kind of what you were talking about. But the real difference between the two schools is basically just that, yeah, they are supposed to be a little bit higher level of education. But like I say, in reality, it is a difficult thing to try to achieve. But all it means is just that the kids that have the potential to be able to advance a little bit more than the average person, they should be given the opportunity to be able to do that. Whereas if they're in a general school, then they're only going to be taught up to a certain level regardless, because that's the level that most kids are going to be able to absorb. Now, the differences between the two, I'm not sure that they're as great as what it would look from an outside perspective, but there are differences, and or at least there used to be advantages if you were able to take on board a little bit more information, then you probably would benefit more from the grammar school. But at the same time, most people in the UK would just go to a secondary modern, and their output for education is pretty good. Also, they're both government funded. They're both up to the same restrictions, and there's also a lot of people trying to get into each school, and so they're stuck with the constraints of that. The difference with the grammar, I guess, with that though, is that they can pick and choose a little bit more which kids they take on board. That has to be within their geographic area still, but it means that they can take the cream of the crop. But by doing that, then that means that they're automatically, to some extent, taking away a lot of the good students from the secondary moderns, which is then going to affect the academic scores or the overall output of a secondary modern. In every class, you're going to have kids that don't do very well, kids that are pretty much average, and then a couple that do really well. Now, if you just take all those really well students and you put them in one place, then that's going to skew the average from what's left. So it does kind of muck things up a little bit for everybody else, I guess. But also, grammar schools, they're not that popular in the UK still. They used to be a lot more popular than what they are now.
I don't know. I don't quite understand exactly what this is, but anyway, I understand that it's a little more complicated than the US, it seems. Church schools.
There's no separation of church and state in the UK, so many schools, both state and public, are church schools. Oddly, this doesn't translate into later church attendance, which is much lower in the UK than in the US.
I've heard that.
Sort of like how most people don't use algebra after the age of 18, I guess. Uniforms. Pretty much.
Isn't that so true? That, at least in the US, we're taught all this random stuff that I've literally never used one time in my life after I got out of school. All these different types of math and things like that. I definitely believe that it would be better to kind of have an updated version of school to kind of fit modern times. I mean, we obviously need to know the basics. People need to learn how to read and write and do basic math and learn some basic history and things like that. But then from then on, it should be more vocational in nature, in my opinion, that people that, like, if you're not going to be an engineer or some kind of profession that needs more advanced math, why do you need to learn calculus and trigonometry? It's just kind of one of those things. It's just, I knew it was a waste of time.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword though, isn't it? Because you never really know in advance what information you're going to need to know when you're older. And you've got a much better chance of learning that type of information at school than what you have as an adult. Yeah, imagine as an adult, anybody out there that's age 30 onwards, imagine trying to go back to school and learn algebra. Now, yeah, as it is, things like algebra, they're made to seem a lot more complicated than they really are. And I think that is what causes a lot of problems with things like maths or calculus or math or however you want to call it. It all comes down to the same subject that nobody really wants to do and nobody likes doing and most people aren't very good at. And yeah, it does need to be updated because most people don't know multiplication, they don't know the times table. Most people aren't very good at percentages and all the stuff that you use in everyday life. So I think that it should be updated enough to make sure that people have a better level of general maths for later life. But at the same time, the more difficult parts of maths, things like trigonometry, you've got a much higher chance of understanding that when you're at school. And okay, not so much trigonometry because you're not as likely to need that after school, but there's a lot of things that you learn during maths that you may need or that may be more helpful to you when you're older, and it's going to be much more difficult to learn if you have to go back and try and learn it. So it's just about trying to give a big base education, I think, to make sure that all scenarios are covered. But at the same time, the fact that people are so poor at maths once they've left school means that it definitely needs revisiting. And he's right, we need to make sure that at least the basics are completely understood before we worry about people moving on to more advanced subjects or more advanced levels of maths.
For me when I was in school, and I still know all these years later that it was still a waste of time, and I would have much preferred to, learn to build something in that time, learn to cook, even learn to do taxes, learn to, the ins and outs of.
Yeah, but in the UK system, you should be doing those things as well. You should be doing something where you're getting some hands-on experience at trying to build things, or doing some woodwork or metalwork or technical drawing and things like that. You should also be doing some stuff that would later go on to be classed as business school type stuff, which is learning to do things like your taxes and stuff like that, or how to work computers, getting towards computer programming. Obviously, everything depends on which school you're going to, and everything varies up and down. I know that there's a basic level that schools have to teach to, but the amount that they can go into any one subject obviously varies from school to school and stuff like that, and how much emphasis they put on each particular topic. In the central London, I know maybe they put more emphasis on building. In the outer reaches of the country, maybe they put more emphasis on woodworking or something. You're probably going to get that because it's more applicable towards their own actual physical geographic area. But generally, you should be doing those things, or in most UK schools, you would do those things as well as, not so much instead of.
Setting up a business, learn to, all on and on. There's so many different things I would have much preferred to learn in school than all this advanced nonsense that I've never used my entire life. History is one of those things that I wish I'd paid more attention to in school, but at the time I didn't find interesting. But definitely, that's definitely something I'm more interested in now. But, I don't know. I just think that, also so many different things that kids now can just easily look up at any moment they want to, or are taught in school still, at least in America. And it just, I don't know. I do believe, one thing I disagree with though is these people that say, oh, we don't need to teach basic math and things like that because they have calculus. No, I disagree with that. I think we should. You need to teach children all the main subjects to a minimum level.
Yeah, we're also getting that with spelling as well, because people don't write things down anymore. They're always trying to write things on their phone. Then it means that, or on a computer with your spell check, where they rely on spell check to correct the words rather than actually learning to write it properly. When would somebody nowadays actually look a word up in an actual physical paperback dictionary? And that's the way on how you would learn more words, because every time you go to look up a word in a dictionary, you'll see loads of other words that just pique your interest, and you would expand your knowledge because of that. Plus, because you go through the effort of physically looking it up and it's so much hassle, you put a bit more effort into actually remembering how it's spelt. Whereas if you just type it into Google, I'm not sure that you've got that same level of commitment towards actually learning the spelling, or even pay attention to how it's spelt. You just click autocorrect and move on. So yeah, that's great where you've got your computer or where you've got your calculator. But when it comes to actually being able to do stuff in the real world, when you're not surrounded in technology, actually doing your job or something like that, then it just means that we end up with a population of people that really can't do anything without electronic support. And that's just a really bad thing.
But the advanced stuff, is where I'm like, if I'm not planning on using advanced math, why am I why teach kids that until they get to a place where like, what, I want to go and explore being an engineer. Okay, then you need to go and learn some advanced math.
All schools have some kind of uniform, ranging from a school jumper all the way up to the white tie and tails that they wear at Eton. The idea behind it is to create a sense of identity and school pride. See? Still fits.
That's one thing that I would say if someone said, hey, what do you think of when you hear the phrase British schools? The first thing that pops in my head is seeing kids with uniforms on. In America, I don't really think that's much of a thing. I've never really, at least in public schools, which are, I can't even remember what it was for you guys. What was that? I'm already confused. Oh, state schools, right? Yeah. Our public schools are your state schools. I got to remember that. And our private schools are your public schools. Man. Okay. Anyway, I always think of uniforms when it comes to British schools, but when it comes to America, I never think of uniforms in our public schools, which is your state schools. So is that still a thing? Do generally all the schools across the board, whether they're your state schools or whether they're your public schools? Yeah, I got that right this time. Do they generally all have uniforms? She made it sound like that was the case. I'm guessing some schools don't, but whenever I've seen like any type of, I don't know, TV show or somehow videos of any type that showed British kids in school, I've always noticed them with uniforms.
All children in the UK wear a school uniform, and that's across all of the countries within the UK as well, so Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. And it is down to the fact that if everybody's wearing the same, then you're not going to have some kids being bullied because they've not got as much money and they're wearing scabby sort of clothes versus somebody who's wearing their very expensive clothes and then showing off because of it. That's what the school uniform was born out. Plus also it helps identify which school people go to. The stereotype between what you see in Harry Potter for the Hogwarts school, that's based on a British school, on the British school system. Now, obviously, we don't have magic and dragons and stuff, which would make things a lot more cool and we'd probably learn a lot more. But aside from that, we do have house groups, usually split into 4. We do have uniforms, and the classes are pretty much anything between 20 kids to 30, 35 kids per class. If you're in a very small school in the middle of Cornwall, then you might only have 5 or 6 people in your class, and you might end up getting your school dinners sent in from another local school because your school's too small to cook. But in those exceptional circumstances, then most schools throughout the UK are standard throughout, whether they're grammar schools, private schools, academic based sort of academies, anything like that. They're all pretty much standard as far as things like school uniform goes and the basic level of education that's taught.
I never experienced that, obviously, but I think it's kind of cool. I'm sure the kids sometimes don't like it, but as an adult, I look at it and I do think it probably creates a level of camaraderie with the students and a type of pride for their school in a way.
The thing with school uniforms, it's like with any uniform. When you put on your uniform, your mindset does change. Especially with somebody from a military background or anything like that, then they'll know that when you put on your uniform, also even security or something like that, I guess, police or ambulance, anything, if you put on a uniform that means something, then your mindset does change, your attitude changes, you become in a different frame of mind and you adjust to that new scenario. So I think that it does kind of trigger the brain a little bit to go from how you would react and behave at home to how you do at school. And a lot of kids that misbehave a lot at home don't misbehave at school. Obviously, you do get kids messing around and stuff, but I mean, they will act differently at school to at home. A part of that, perhaps even just a small part of it, but part of it is the school uniform.
So I think kind of like a sports uniform in a way does that. I kind of think that's pretty cool, actually. And it's something that I think would be beneficial for more American schools to adopt.
Prefects. In British schools, older students can be chosen to be prefects.
Oh, one more thing I want to say about the uniforms is also, if you have uniforms, it makes it to where more well-off students aren't, how do I put this? The poorer students don't have to feel as bad about not being able to keep up with the latest styles, if you will, of the more well-off students. That can be something that it's not traumatizing to adults generally, but it definitely can feel traumatizing to certain children, to have that experience of their parents not being able to buy them, new clothes every year and things like that. And so if there's uniforms, then it definitely makes sense that would make everybody feel a little bit more, I don't know, even.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly what it's about. It's about everybody starting off on an even foot. Now, yeah, you're always going to get differences still. And the thing with the school uniform is it is quite expensive. So the actual jumpers and the shirts and trousers, they're pretty generic. You can get those from, the equivalent of Walmart. But the blazers, there's not that many shops that sell the blazers, and also the badges and your school tie. So your blazer, you don't always have to wear the blazer, because in the summer months you can wear a jumper instead of a blazer. Or it used to be like that anyway. I think it's still like it. So it means that as soon as you deem it warm enough to ditch the blazer, which you're going to want to do as quickly as you can, because, well, it's like wearing it's a uniform. You don't want to be at school, let alone wearing a uniform. Yeah, there is some element of unity throughout the school because everybody's wearing the same uniform, I guess. But at the same time, you're still a kid who's been made to wear a uniform, so you're not going to want to wear it. So as soon as you can ditch the blazer, then you're probably going to. And you're going to just wear the jumper with your tie and shirt. But the blazers, they're quite expensive. So it means that if you are from one of those families that don't have as much money, then you have to pay out for these expensive blazers and the school tie and the badge and all the rest of it. And you've got a couple of kids, then that can add up really quick. And then they're only going to wear it for a little amount of time because as soon as they can ditch it and put on the jumpers instead, then that's exactly what they're going to do. A lot of schools now are pushing more towards keeping the blazers on regardless of the jumpers. And that's probably better because at least you get to use it for a while, or your kids get to use it for a while. But at the same time, that there is, it's all well and good having a uniform, but if parts of that uniform are expensive, then that means that you're already starting to penalise the people that couldn't afford the decent clothes in the first place. So it is better because it stops the bullying at schools through kids wearing more expensive stuff, but at the same time, it puts a lot of strain on the families that can't afford it in the first place. There should be some type of help towards those families for school uniforms. Now, there were some initiatives that were brought out before, but I don't think that they were particularly successful.
A little bit more together. I feel like it would, again, it would bring kids together in a way. Sorry for stopping there. Let's continue.
Being a prefect sounds super cool, but in reality it mostly entails policing the lunch line and stopping the younger kids from hitting each other. You do get a cool badge though, so that's something. Most schools also have a head boy and a head girl who attend school council meetings and give a speech at prize giving at the end of the year. Oh, prize giving is the closest thing that we have to a graduation ceremony.
Wait, you guys don't have graduation ceremonies? So how does that work? So do you, once school is over with, you just don't go back for any type of thing? She said there was some sort of prize giving. Is that, I mean, she said that's the closest thing you had to a graduation ceremony. So I don't know. Does that mean that you guys have some sort of general?
Yeah, with the prefects that she mentioned, if you're a pretty good student, you're getting all right score marks, you're not getting in trouble, then you could get yourself elected as a prefect. I'm not sure what system each school's using to work out who can and can't be a prefect. Not all schools have prefects, but they're basically just, somebody that would help guide students around or, basic things like that, and get to attend one or two meetings. But there's not really as much emphasis on prefects anymore as what there used to be. It was a much bigger thing. But for school prom, no, we don't do that. Now, there are schools starting to do it, and it is becoming very, well, sorry, but very Americanized. And it's something that Britain is trying their best to stay away from, because what it means is that instead of celebrating the fact that you've just finished school, you've hopefully done quite well and all the rest of it, it suddenly becomes about who's got the most amount of money to hire out some cheesy type of limo and a prom dress that costs the same as a wedding dress to go and stand there and act fake in front of their friends for a couple of hours. That's not something that we really want in Britain if we can help it, because it takes away from the essence of what the end of year is supposed to be about and just becomes some big commercial event, which is pretty much what's happened to Halloween in the UK. It's become a lot more like an American system where people are just dressing in whatever they want and just going around. It's just become some big commercial enterprise rather than the actual basis for what it was all about. Well, not the basis for what it was about, because it was a little bit dark for what it originally came from, but I mean the parts as far as kids and Guy Fawkes and that sort of stuff used to go. Well, school prom, that's pretty much the same. It's been pushed by companies that stand to make money out of it. But usually when you leave school, then you do your exams, your final exams, and then you leave school. That's it. I mean, some schools do have a party, and it used to be just a standard traditional sort of party that you would expect a school to throw for the kids, not like an American prom. Just a standard, fairly quiet disco type party. I'm not going to say like a nightclub type party. It is closer to something that you'd probably interpret for the word disco, because that's what schools would do. A very low-key version of a night at a nightclub. You're not going to have alcohol. You are going to have a DJ and you're going to have some type of dance floor, but it's not going to be anything like what a school American prom is. And not all schools do the final year type party either. But schools are being pushed, or kids are being pushed more towards this whole prom nonsense, and it's not a good thing. It really isn't, because it just becomes about, the reason why we switch to things like the school uniform, it undoes all of that, doesn't it? It just comes down to who's got the most money to spend on the biggest, flashiest looking limo to try and show off to their friends with, who can afford the most expensive prom dress and all the rest of the nonsense that goes with it. And that's never ever going to be a good thing. But what you would do is you would get your marks through the post with your exams, and you'll also be able to go into the school and look on the board for your exams to see what you scored. So yeah, there is everybody going back. You don't just literally walk out the school on your last day and never turn back. But at the same time, a lot of people do exactly that. You'll leave school and you'll either go off to work, or you'll go off to the sixth form, or you'll go off to college. College in the UK is in the middle between school and university. I know you call the more kind of high profile universities colleges, but in the UK a college is below a university.
Get together or celebration where these high school kids get their diplomas, or does that not exist? Do they just get their diplomas mailed to them or something? How exactly does that work? Also, guys, I just want to mention, if you have any other videos that go even deeper into how the British school system works, please let me know. I'm also curious.
You're watching it.
How the Irish school system works, but I haven't really found a video on that so far. And really, this was one of the few videos I really found that looked like it would probably be pretty good. So they seems to not be very many videos about this topic out there.
Exams. National exams are a huge part of the British school experience. It's all very simple. You take GCSEs at 16 and then A-levels at 18, which are kind of like AP exams, but different. Also, in Scotland they study for Highers instead of A-levels, and GCSEs used to be called O-levels. Also, AS levels happen in the middle of A-levels. Look, this is the most complicated bit, I promise.
Okay, yeah, she did skip over a few things there. GCSEs, basically when you're on your penultimate year from leaving school, so last but one year from leaving school, you'll take your mocks, which is basically like taking your GCSEs as a practice to see what level you're at and see what you need to work on. On your final year, you take your GCSEs. That's when you're 16, about to leave school, the final thing you do. Now you can either then take those GCSEs and whatever results that you got and go off into working, or if you get really good scores, you might be able to stay on at that school and study your A-levels in the sixth form with 2 years for your A-levels, which will be lower sixth and upper sixth, basically year 1 and year 2 of doing your A-levels. If your scores are alright and you still want to do your A-levels anyway, but you haven't got good enough scores to be able to stay at your local school, the school where you took your main exams, then you can go to a college. Now a college in the UK, like I say, is a middle marker between school and university. It's not a university and it's not a school, it really is in the middle. And it's where you would go, it's the equivalent of the sixth form in a school. So you would go to a college and you would do your A-levels at college, which again is 2 years, just like the sixth form but in a different building, a different location basically. The AS qualification that she mentioned is in between a GCSE and an A-level. And the reason why that exists is because people that want to be able to go to university but couldn't quite do an A-level can take AS levels, and it can give you enough credits, enough points, enough academic standing to be able to get a place at a university. So you might not be able to get into a university with just GCSEs, you need more, but you might not have done your A-levels. Or if you're an adult that wants to go back into education to do your A-levels in higher, as an adult student, that could be quite a handful because of the time, the commitment and the level of information that you've got to do in a fairly short amount of time. If you're going back to education, that can be quite a handful. Whereas an AS is in between a GCSE and an A-level. That will give you the ability and the academic standing to be able to then apply into a university. So if you've already left school and want to go back to college, want to go back to university or go to university, then that's a good way that you would be able to do it as an adult. If you're a child and you've done your GCSEs but you don't want to commit to A-levels, then you can do an AS level. I think most AS levels are 1 year rather than 2 years, I think. But it also, I think that the problem might even just vary on how many you take and what you take. I think that if you were an adult student going back to college to take your AS level qualifications purely to get into a university, then it would probably be also expected that you'll have to take some mandatory other subjects such as maths and English, as well as the actual core subjects that you want to take, whether that's law or whatever. And that's just so that universities accepting people with AS level qualifications, they know that they're up to a standard that's above GCSE, but they might not be up quite as high as an A level. So it gives a decent standard format.
I started to say, didn't she say it was like simple or something? That didn't seem very simple. That seemed like what? So it sounds like there's only a couple of times the kids really take end of year exams, or like these big exams. Generally speaking, from what I understand in modern American schools, children usually take a year an exam every single year before they move on to the next grade. Now, the exam doesn't necessarily mean is going to dictate whether they move on, but it's about the fact it kind of gauges where they're at, basically, compared to the rest of the student body, the rest of their peers. So to give you kind of like what percentile in reading, what percentile in math they're in compared to their peer level in a way. So do you guys have something similar there, or is it just kind of like you get to, I don't know, the sixth grade, for example, and then you take an exam before you move on to middle school, and then you take an exam before you move on to high school or something like that?
Yeah, with the UK, your end of year mark is based partly on the work that you do during the year, your exercises, your assignments, or whatever you want to call them, but it's also based on an end of year exam. Now, all that really counts towards is working out what sort of academic level you're at, so that when you progress to the next year, if there's an upper and lower tier to any particular lessons, then you can be put to the more appropriate one. But even if you don't do any schoolwork throughout the year, you just manage to float your way through and you take the exams but you fail all of them, you still progress up to the next year regardless. You don't get held back just because you failed an exam. So yeah, say if you was in year 3, you would still move to year 4 for the next year regardless. At the end of school, you take one final set of exams, your GCSEs, which count to, they're the things that you leave school with, the equivalent of the American GED, I think. But the work that you do during the year, your assignments or whatever you're going to term it as, carry towards 30 or 40% of your GCSE overall kind of mark. So you can't just do nothing, do no assignments and stuff like that all year long, and then expect to take your exam at the end of the year, even if you know the information, and then expect to walk out with a straight A, because you won't. You're kind of based on the year that you've done and your final year exam, not just one or the other. It did used to be just the end of year exam, but they changed it to kind of make it so that it wasn't weighted all on the exam, because a lot of people, they know a lot of stuff, but when they put it into an exam, they just go to pieces, or they just can't remember it at the time. And exams aren't a great way of, testing how much a person knows anyway. So then waiting an entire school life on one set of exams, that was obviously a really bad idea. And that's why they started to integrate the work that you're doing during the year as well. But nowadays, because everything's so electronic, when you leave school and you move on to a future employer, then your kind of whole school history to some extent would move with you. Whereas even just 10, 15 years ago, when you left school, then all you've got is the piece of paper in your hand that says your qualifications. You don't take your school life with you in any sort of way. But that's changing because we're becoming a little bit more connected, and things like the internet and stuff like that makes it so that information is a lot more accessible to outsider groups. Obviously, your school and academic records aren't going to be accessible to an employer, but it means that an employer would know that those records would exist, and so might expect to get some type of reference from your school or something like that. Whereas before, that just wouldn't really be done. If you was going for your first job, you wouldn't take a reference from your school. Whereas now that's a little bit more so. That is more the case.
Revision. This is just what we call studying for exams. It's not a biggie, just a lot of people seemed confused about it. Juniors and seniors. Instead of the American system of elementary school, middle school and so on, most British schools are divided into juniors and seniors. Junior school, also called primary school, is for 4 to 11-year-olds, and senior school is for 11 to 18-year-olds. And some public schools, they divide it up a little differently. They have pre-prep from 4 to 7, prep from 7 to 13, and then senior from 13 to 18.
Wait. 4? Wow. Are 4-year-olds are in, like, not just preschool, but actual, the equivalent of what we call elementary school here, which generally speaking, we have a kindergarten and then first grade through 12th grade. Kindergartens are in elementary school with the, just like first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade are. So it's kindergarten through fifth grade in elementary. Generally speaking, you have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is called middle school or junior high in a lot of cases. And then obviously 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, is high school.
Yeah, in the UK, when you start school at 4, that first school that you go to, the school system that I was in, the way that it was called was first school, middle school, and senior school. Now we are moving more into first grade, second grade type system in the UK because schools were called different things in different areas. Just the same as you have, different slang words for different things in different areas. Well, that's pretty much how the school system was to some extent. What I might call a first school or middle school, she's putting down as junior school. And the middle school is a junior school. And then you go off to senior school. So it kind of needed to be unified, I guess. But the school that I went to, the first 4 years that you do, you start it when you're 4. During that first 4 years, that's when you would learn your times table up to 10 times table. We'll actually usually go to 12 times table for some reason. And then you just do other basic stuff, basic language like cat, hat, that type of word learning. But there's also a lot of play involved. So it's based partly around socialising and getting people to be used to being around other people and learning about friends and the dynamics of being at school and things like that, at the same time as learning very basic education. The sort of stuff that you'd expect, that in the UK at least, the sort of stuff that you'd expect to teach, not toddlers because you are talking about 4 onwards, but you're going to go to middle school for 4 years, so you'd expect a reasonable amount of education to be covered in that 4 years. Your middle school is where you start to learn a little bit more advanced stuff, and as you go through the years, that's when it leads towards senior school.
How exactly does that work here? It sounds a little bit different. I mean, we got juniors up till age 12. I guess you count age 11 in that. And then 12 to 18. So that seems like you start earlier and you end elementary school, or our equivalent of elementary school earlier. And then there's really no middle school and just goes straight to the more high school at an earlier age.
Yeah, for say first school or middle school, then it'll be on the same grounds, but they usually are separate schools. So separate buildings at least within the same school area, I guess. So you would start when you're 4 years old and you would leave when you was 8 years old. But what that meant in real terms is that you would go from the little playground and your half of the school through to the bigger playground and the middle school. So yeah, they are different schools, but they don't tend to be on different geographic locations. They're always usually in the same place. It's just so that the very small kids aren't around the junior kids that are playing a bit more rougher and things like that. Everybody's kept to their own kind of age group.
So I don't know if that's starting at 12 or is that starting at 13? That's interesting. Okay. Sixth form.
Sixth form. The last 2 years of school is called the sixth form, divided into the lower sixth and upper sixth. The name is a hangover from a previous, more complicated system of naming classes which has stuck around for some reason. In many schools, sixth formers are given a lot more freedom than the other students, often being allowed to wear their own clothes instead of school uniform. Cool. University.
So I'm guessing that is probably something the kids in the UK look forward to, if in general, like it seems most schools, most kids throughout, no matter what school they're in the UK, generally wear uniforms. If that is correct, I'm guessing that by the time they get to the last 2 years, they look forward to being able to wear whatever they choose. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, when you reach the level where you can go into the sixth form, if your marks are good enough so you can stay at the school that you're at to do your A-levels, then you do get to not have to wear school uniform, and you also get introduced to the idea of having free periods, which will be, something really new and a really good thing. So it means that you might not have to start as early, you might get to finish early, or just have lessons that you can completely skip because you don't have a lesson at that time. If you go off to college to do your A-levels, which is essentially what sixth form is, it's just about doing your A-levels, whether you do it at school or at college, because like I say, college is in the middle mark between school and university. So if you go to college to do your sixth form, then you're going to get even more freedom, because obviously there's no school uniform at any type of college, no uniform for any year or any part of college. But you also get to travel to somewhere new, you're around slightly older people, you don't have younger school kids. When you're in college, you've got to generally behave as you would in any other public building. And in lessons, you've got to, whatever you want to call them, you've got to behave, obviously. But outside of that, you've got a lot more freedoms, and it's a lot more like a stepping stone towards university. And that's what colleges are. They are a stepping stone towards university, separating you from being at school where you're being led through every single thing by the nose and told what to do every single minute, and having somebody do everything almost for you, all the thinking for you. You don't have to do as much thinking because you're being coached by the teachers. At college, you're a bit more independent. You have to do stuff for yourself, and that's because when you get to university, you've got to do pretty much everything for yourself. So it's to help lower people into that environment. I think that A-levels at school in the sixth form, you don't get as much world experience in that section, but you might, some would argue, get a slightly better educational experience. Whereas at college, you probably get a bit more world savvy, but you might not necessarily get quite as good as educational experience because it's a college. Colleges are good, some obviously better than others, but doing your A-levels at sixth form at school is always going to be held in higher regard as far as education standard goes. Whether that's actually true or not, I don't know. I think there's a big debate on that, and it's very, very difficult to see without testing every single one, which is never going to happen.
Okay. University, which I think is basically the equivalent of what... Wait, hold on, let me see.
You apply to do a single subject at British universities and only study that one thing. No maths or language requirements or any of that other stuff that you have to do at American colleges. Bachelor's degrees generally take 3 years, and you know what, let's just cover this in another video. It's very complicated.
I think I get what she's saying, and I totally agree with it. So in American schools, if you go to college, you go, university, we pretty much consider both of those interchangeable. Universities generally are, when someone calls a college a university, it generally means it's usually a little bit more, it's a little bit better of a school, if you will, probably a little bit more expensive, and anyway.
Yeah, like she said, in the UK, when you go to university, then if you're going to do a degree, then it will be for 3 to 4 years, depending on the degree. But the first year, some degrees are 4 years, and it's because the first year you're kind of recapping a little bit of the stuff that you probably should have done at school. A lot of degrees, though, are 3 years. Diplomas tend to be 2 years. Colleges in the UK, they're just nothing to do with university. You wouldn't do a degree at a college, but you could do a diploma at a college, where you put the distinction between kind of slightly higher class or better known and more recognised universities. Yeah, we do have things in the UK where some universities, where they're long-standing existing universities, are recognised a little bit more as a stronger university with a better reputation than some of the newer universities. But that's not necessarily the case, but that is one of the kind of the sort of themes that you do still get. What university you go to does influence how people would interpret your level of education now. So if you've got an Oxbridge education, so from Oxford or Cambridge or even Eton or something, then you're going to be seen slightly different to if you go to a university that's somewhere a lot less popular, a lot less well known, or where people might not have even heard of the university. It's not that you're necessarily going to get a better or worse education out of it. It's just how people view these things. And in fact, thinking about it, I think that to some extent, universities that are a little bit more based around reputation and trying to at least give the impression of a higher level of education, they're probably going to be better as far as your academic career goes, but for student experience, they're probably going to be the least enjoyable. A university that has a bit of a compromise between giving you a very good standard of education and also makes it so that it's at least enjoyable for the student, or as much as it ever can be, then I think that might be the place where most people would probably try to aim for, because student experience is something that's becoming more and more accounted for when people are applying to universities. Once you've done your degree at university, so your Bachelor in Science or whatever it is that you're going to do, then you can then go off to do your Masters or a PhD or something like that. And again, you'll do that at, you could either do it at the same university or go off to a different university. So you could do your degree at a university that's slightly less well known, which might be a slightly less expensive degree, and then assuming that you get good marks from that and you intend to go on to more education afterwards. So if you're going to do a PhD or a Master's, you could then go to a slightly more expensive and slightly better recognised university to do that, so that you can carry that forward with you, because you're only really recognised by the last level of education that you did and where you did that last bit of learning. So I guess what I'm trying to say is you could go to a university that's a bit more run-of-the-mill and the tuition fees are pretty more reasonable and things like that, and then you could go off to somewhere that's got a bit better reputation and do your final set of study at that university so that you can move that forwards. So we do have kind of a bit of a class system with the universities with regard to that, but generally they all have to adhere to the same level of education, and also the actual degree that you take is determined by outside bodies. So like, for example, when I went to university, I trained as a psychologist, and I took a Bachelor of Science at one university, and I did exactly what I was just describing. I went to a different university for the PhD. That was mainly because I was offered a studentship at the other university, where they basically pay for your education and they pay you a maintenance fee if you study with them. So I was quite lucky with that. So it means that, that for the PhD study, it meant that I didn't need to pay out anything. In fact, I was actually being paid to study it. So I was really, really lucky. But when I trained as a psychologist, one thing that I had to look at before I took a degree is where that degree is recognised. So when I was looking where I was going to take my degree in the UK, one thing that I had to consider is the degree that I was taking. Now, I took a Bachelor of Science with honours. Now, you've got something called the British Psychological Society in the UK, and they list which degrees they determine are up to standard for a person to be classed as a qualified psychologist. And that exists because some degrees, like I know that we've got something in the UK called Open University, and it's basically online learning. You have to go to a physical place to take an exam. But say if you, or at the time when I took my degree at least, I don't know about now, but if I was to take a degree with the Open University and I trained as a psychologist, not all establishments would recognise that degree because it wasn't accepted by the British Psychological Society at the time. Now, like I say, it's at the time rather than now. I don't know, you need to look into it now. So it means that you needed to work out where you was going for your degree to make sure that it was up to a unified recognised standard and would be accepted across the board. So say if you want to go and get a job with the NHS as a psychologist, you need to make sure that your degree is recognised by, for this at least, by the BPS, by the British Psychological Society, whereas some degrees just weren't. So there are lots of things that you need to think about when you're kind of choosing outside of school, because schools are quite tightly controlled by the government, but as you branch out from there, then things do start to change more and more.
Like Harvard University, you would never call Harvard school, if you will. Probably a little bit more expensive, and anyway. like Harvard University. You would never call Harvard College or Yale College or Princeton College. You would call those universities. But there's definitely some, you know, universities that people will call colleges. But it sounds like basically you get out of the equivalent of high school, and then you apply to a university, and you go to that university, and you don't have to take all these pre-classes of just random generic general education. It sounds like you basically go directly into studying for what you are going to school for, which totally makes sense. It's one of
Yeah, exactly that. So when you're at school, if you do your A-levels at school, then fine, you can go to university from there. Or you leave school, you go to a college, you take your A-levels or AS levels, and you go off to university from that point. At university, your first year will be doing just subjects related to, like for me, with psychology. So you'd just do subjects that are related to psychology. You wouldn't be doing any outside subjects. So the fourth year or third year, whatever length of time your degree is, mine was 3 years, but your first year you're going to do a wide variety of stuff, you know, things like the history of psychology and stuff that's not necessarily any actual use towards the thing that you want to do at the end, but stuff that you need to kind of know along the way. The second year will be a lot more focused, and that's where you start to get towards more specialist type things. And your final year is when you choose exactly which kind of avenue of, say, for again psychology, whether you wanted to go into clinical psychology or behaviour or memory, or yeah, that's where you would steer it a lot more. So you do more in the first year than what you would need to, but it is also used a little bit like a shaking tree. So people that can't keep up with that level of education and that pace tend to end up dropping off in that first year. So the people that you've got on year 2 tend to be, you know, the main proportion of who's likely to make it. The final year, you know, I started with about 300 students in year 1. By the final year, there's probably only 30 of us. So it's quite a big drop-off rate. Yeah, it was quite a good, strong degree and stuff. And so it was quite difficult, I guess. But at the same time, yeah, so universities, you know, they can't really survive by only teaching 30 students at the end of the final year. But they get so many students applying and going in on that first year that money kind of helps outweigh. I think that they take an aggregate of what they earn during that 3 years to be able to financially survive or make profit. But it means that that dropout rate on that first year is quite high. But it's because you only do subjects related to the course that you're studying, but you do quite a lot of them. It is pretty intense on that first year. I think that if you make it through your first year, then that is the biggest hurdle, especially if you're going from somewhere like school. I think that it would be even more of a hurdle because you've got to very much support yourself and push yourself to do the work. Whereas if you've gone through to college, then you're a little bit more responsible for your own work, skive type balance, I guess.
one of the things I always thought was so ridiculous here in America. It's almost on par with the same thing of, like, you know, in high school, you know, 11th grade, you got to take calculus. And it's like, what if the person is planning on getting out of school and, I don't know, going to a trade school to learn how to be a motorcycle mechanic, for example, or going to start their own landscaping business or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, they don't need calculus or trigonometry or something like that. It's just, you know, I think, you know, you teach kids basics and then you allow them to kind of.
Yeah, in the UK, once you've left school, you wouldn't redo those subjects. Yeah, you do maths, English, and all the rest of it at school as part of your basic education. But then when you go on to anything else from there on, unless you're particularly choosing those subjects, then you're not going to recover them. You'll only ever cover the subjects that you're intending to specialise in, whether that's mechanics and you do mechanical engineering or something like that, or whether it's, you know, molecular biology, whatever it is that you're doing. You're only going to do from school onwards subjects related to that. Anything else is just a waste of time. And also you'd be expected to already know the basics of English and maths and that sort of stuff before you got to the point of university.
Dictate what they want to learn from that point on, for the most part.
So there we go. Are there any things about British schools that you have questions about? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos. Also, if you have any other questions about British culture, you can tweet us at Anglophenia, and maybe your topic will be covered in another video.
All right, that was informative in a very short video. I was hesitant on this video when I started, but it was the top video for looking up British schools, right? And I was hesitant because it was so short, but it was very informative, actually. I learned quite a bit about how the school system works over there. Does the Irish school system work pretty much the same, or is it definitely different to the point that I need to learn about that separately? And I'm also...
Yeah, with Ireland, things are slightly different in so much as Ireland's a little bit more religious, and it depends whether you're on about Northern Ireland or South Ireland. A lot of the schools in South Ireland, I don't know about now, but used to be run by nuns and stuff like that. So I think that it just depends on which particular part you're talking about and what parts of the schools, you know, whether you're just on about the level of education or how they're run. So I think that it's the specifics with that, because Ireland is a little bit more unique compared to Scotland, Wales and England.
Also curious, she didn't really answer this question that I kind of had earlier in this video, and that was the fact, I think I said that earlier, are British schools kind of a top-down approach, so to speak? Like, is there like a central location, maybe London, for example, that all the curriculum comes out of, all the funding for the schools come out of, and things like that? And are all the schools throughout the UK funded on an equal percentage basis based off of kids, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, that's yes, no. So yeah, the curriculum is set by national government, by Westminster, you know, London. The level of education has to be unified throughout the country, so there's a basic level that everyone has to teach. From that onwards, they can teach more, but they can't teach less. Funding, I mean, you also have input, financial input from local areas as well, but the main bulk of the money does come from main government. As far as the actual education itself, again, that's set by main government, and that has to be covered and adhered to by all schools. They can teach more, but they can't teach less. So both money and level of education is determined by main national government, by London, by Westminster.
Because in the US, the reason a lot of schools fail, right, is simply because school systems are funded through property taxes on a local level. So as you can imagine that, I don't know, let's say you go to Alexandria, Virginia, right outside of Washington, D.C., one of the wealthiest areas in the country. You know, a lot of those people work in government, and they're just getting paid very, very well. You know, I think the average household income there may be, I don't even know, what is it, $250,000, $300,000 or more a year? I don't even know. Average, okay? So, you know, or median income, excuse me. So you can imagine that is a much wealthier place than a lot of, I don't know, inner city school districts, for example, where the average or the median income may be $30,000 a year or something like that, right? Or, you know, household income. So you can imagine the property taxes that are funding those schools are going to be completely, you know, it's going to be a completely different amount of money. You know, you got these houses over here in Alexandria, Virginia that may be worth, you know, $1.5, $2 million or more on an average basis. I don't know. I'm kind of making those numbers up. I have seen those numbers, but it's been so long that I have no idea what the median income and the housing prices are there. I'm just saying they're so much more expensive, those houses, and the people make so much more money there than in a lot of other areas in the country, right? So you got two different school systems that get funded vastly different.
Yeah, that goes back to what I was saying earlier. I mean, where you're on about your property tax, we call it council tax, but it's essentially the same thing. You know, just the amount that the local government charge for houses in that area, and part of the money that each local council, which is like a smaller branch of government, managed to earn from their area, they are expected to put it on resources for their area. But the main money for schools does come from national government, but that is topped up by the money for the local areas. So it means that some areas do have better schools than others. They have more money to spend. And also, if you're performance tested and your funding is based on performance, then schools in different areas are going to get penalised regardless. So yeah, it is a similar sort of system, and it does make it pretty unfair. It also means that you want to get into schools from better areas, or you want to get your kids into schools from better areas, but that comes down to your postcode, your street address. You can only apply to schools that are within your immediate area. You can't apply to a school that's halfway across the city just because it's a better school. The reason why is because those schools have so many students already, they're already up to capacity. So they can't take on more students than they absolutely have to. Also, I think there's probably a little bit of snobbish behaviour from the schools going on as well. They probably want to keep if they're in a really nice area, then they're going to believe that people from their own area are better in some way than people from a less affluent area. Now, I know I didn't word that very well, but I'm sure that you all know exactly what I mean. And so, through the snobbish sort of behaviour, they're probably going to want to protect what type of student they believe they're going to get coming into the school. And by keeping it local, they're going to, as far as they're concerned, control that a lot more. Now, in reality, I don't think that necessarily works. And if somebody's going to the effort of trying to make sure their child gets into a better school, then you would think that that child's probably a lot more inclined to want to study properly anyway. And also, there's a lot of people from quite reasonable backgrounds, financial backgrounds, that have pretty thick kids and pretty horrible children. So money is certainly not a determinant of how educated a person is going to be or how well behaved. So I don't think it's necessarily a good system, but on the fundamental basics of it, schools can only take in the pupils from their own area because they're already struggling with funding. They can only take on as many students as they have to just to support their own area. They couldn't take on the burden of other areas because they don't have the room or the funding. And you would be bigger class sizes and stuff like that, and that's going to start to affect the level of education that comes out of those schools.
One has the best and the latest technology, can pay the teachers well, the schools are kept up, the buildings are kept up, they have air conditioning and heat and things like that, and then you have other schools that may not have those things as much. And I
don't think the UK is quite as bad as that, because schools have a certain level that they have to maintain, both in the quality of the school, the quality of the building, the quality of the education, the amount of teachers, the class sizes, and all sorts of other stuff like that. So they are very tightly controlled to make sure that everybody, no matter what area you're in, that you're providing a pretty good service regardless. But the bottom line is, you do get what you pay for. If a school's got more money, it's in a better area, they're cherry picking the students, then you're going to get better output. That's all there is to it. So we're not anywhere near as bad from the way that you just described that. If that's the system in the US, we're nowhere near as bad as that. But at the same time, we're certainly not perfect.
So you can see the difference in the quality of the education the kids are probably getting in those two different school systems. And that's throughout the country. That's not just like in inner cities. You go to a lot of different rural areas. Like you go to Appalachia, for example, and most of the people there are poor, and they're at or under the poverty level in a lot of cases. And you can imagine the school systems there are very underfunded because they're basing it off of property taxes in local areas.
Yeah, there is quite a lot of intervention by government to try to stop that from being a problem in the UK, in as much as that families on the poverty line will get benefits from the government. You also get help towards transport fees for bus passes and things like that. The schools provide meals, and you get state funding towards getting those meals. So it means that even if you're from a pretty poor background, a child going to that school is going to get a reasonable standard of education and a decent standard of living, I guess, why they're at that school, regardless of how much money the family has. But the bottom line still is, if you go to a school that's in the middle of Cambridge or something like that, versus a school that's in a very poor, deprived area that's had no funding or reinvestment for many decades, then you are going to get a different school experience, no matter how well the system's supposed to be maintained. But I don't think it's quite as bad as what you're kind of describing for the US. I think that the thing that changes within UK schools is, inner city schools, you're going to get a lot more violence, a lot more rough kids. Not violence like US violence, I mean like a UK equivalent for compared to other schools. You might get the odd kid with a knife or something, but you don't really get that sort of stuff in UK schools. We don't get school shooters. We don't get pupils generally attacking teachers. You'll get in inner city schools pupils answering back to teachers and being rude, and that would be classed as pretty much unacceptable in most other schools, which seems a bit kind of British and pompous, I guess. But that's how we try to maintain the schools, the element of respect towards authority figures. But that is dissolving very quickly in the UK. You can see the way that people act towards the police, the way they act towards teachers and other people of kind of supposed authority, depending on how you want to view them. There used to be a lot greater level of respect towards people like the police and the teachers compared to what there is now. So it's not that it's coming undone in the UK. It's just that the society is changing, and not necessarily for the better. Now, I know that every generation is going to say that about the next generation and versus the previous one and so on, but I think that it really is. And the sort of stories that you get coming out of some of inner city schools in the UK now, even though they're probably not bad in US terms for what you would have necessarily expected in the UK, then they're just definitely going in the wrong direction.
So, a lot of people support school choice. I support school choice. Why? Because when someone doesn't support school choice here in America, it means they are literally agreeing to lock a child into a failing school district. A parent doesn't have for example, let's take a parent in an inner city school, right? A parent in an inner city school district. They're at the poverty level. They don't have the money to pay for private school, but they want to be able to take their kid to a school district that's might be 10 or 15 miles away, right? But because they can't have school choice, they're locked into the school in their zip code, basically. And so they're locked into a failing school when the parent and the child want to go to the other school, but they aren't allowed to have school choice. So don't ask me why we don't have school choice in this country. I think it's ridiculous that we don't. Every child, no child should be locked into a failing school if their parents are willing and wanting.
Yeah, like I say, you do get that in the UK as well. Local schools will only take on pupils from their area for the reasons that I was saying earlier. But you will get people that will move to better areas to get their children into better schools. That's a big thing in the UK as much as it is in the US, I guess. Even if it's a religious school, because you know that you're likely to get a slightly better level of education. And also you're not going to get the more horrible kids turning up. The kids that are, we've got teenagers that are selling drugs on streets and knife crime and all the rest of it, the same as every other country. We don't have gun crime or as much gun crime throughout the general population. Cities like London and stuff, there's obviously more so, or Manchester, but generally speaking, throughout most cities in the UK, gun crime is pretty much unheard of. And the same for knife crime, it is more down to the main cities. London, Manchester, Birmingham are the three cities where you're more likely to hear of some type of knife crime. And even then, it's pretty minimal compared to a lot of other countries, I guess. But you do still have those kids, and you don't want those kids that have to go to school, because if you don't go to school, then your parents get prosecuted. You get the attendance officer, or the wagman as it used to be called, sent round to your house, and they would literally use law to force the child to go to school, or the parents get fined and penalised. If you don't go to school, if you miss days, then you've got to justify it nowadays. It's very strict. So if you've got kids that are selling drugs or into knife crime and gangs, you don't really want your child at school with them, because you want your child to do as well as they can. One, you don't want them to be exposed to anything potentially dangerous, but also you just don't want them in that environment. You want them to be at school to learn, not to learn how to be in a gang. You want them to learn how to understand a human cell or something, you know. So people are going to make effort towards making sure that their child gets to a better school, but that can mean moving house into a particular area to try and get your school into that, to try and get your child into that school. But at the same time, unless you're talking about real inner city schools, and only in some inner cities, then most schools in the UK are generally pretty good. You are going to get exceptions, and you're going to be able to, you know, no doubt trawl through the internet and find some pretty bad looking schools in the centre of London and stuff like that. And that's going to be a lot down to the population of people that's going to the schools, the way that those people are acting, rather than what the school themselves are trying to do. And so that's going to determine what the school's like. It's also going to determine their kind of academic standing against other schools. So people are going to try and avoid that, and those schools do exist, but it really is the minority in the UK for how that plays out. That's not really that big a deal. As long as you live in generally okay sort of area, your children are going to be at school at school in whatever your local school is. Some are going to be better than others, sure, but you're not going to end up in anything like the situation that he's just been describing. There's obviously extremes. You know, we're not talking about the extremes. We're talking about generally most cities, most schools around different parts of the UK.
To drive their child to a school 15 miles down the road. And that's the problem with funding schools with property taxes, on a local level, because it just doesn't make sense. We need to do it more at the minimum on a state level. I don't necessarily think schools should necessarily be on the federal level, because the U.S. is so big. But I think each state, the funding should come from each state on a kind of a more equal basis per student in a way. But yeah,
that's what I'm saying that happens in the UK. Main government take the responsibility for the main funding for the educational system. Each individual area, each local council has influence and a financial input towards their own schools as well. But because you've got that basic kind of level that's put out by main government, then it means that, other than in the extremes where we're just talking about, other than in those sort of circumstances, then it means that most schools are going to be generally pretty good. You're not usually going to get a child that's gone to a school in the UK, an average child in average school, where their education level, or the education that was at least provided, not necessarily what they took on board, but the education that's provided, isn't going to vary a huge amount from a northern school to a southern school, from a school in the east to a school in the west. Yeah, I'm on about within the UK, not globally sort of thing. What I mean is that no matter what part of the UK you go to, you're going to get pretty much the same sort of level of education. Some schools are better than others. Some schools have better funding than others. But even the schools that don't have the better areas, that don't have the better or higher levels of funding, they're still putting out a pretty good level of education. And students coming from those schools are still going on to colleges and universities and are still getting pretty good jobs. The thing that usually determines what work a person gets once they leave school or education is probably more down to their geographic area, what work's actually available in their area, more than the education that they leave school with. But on the other side of the coin, because our system is based around a person having the best, no matter what your financial background, having the best opportunity possible to learn at school, to be able to go to college or whatever you need to do to get into a university, being able to go into a university, you're going to take on student loans, but most people, if you're academically inclined and you have the ability, are going to be able to go to a university no matter what their financial standing is. So even if you're completely broke, you've still got a chance of going to university. But because that is the way, then it means that there's more people with higher levels of education in the UK. And that means when you go into the job market, there's going to be a lot of other people with the exact same qualifications and and level of knowledge as what you've got. So then to get a job in whatever field, so I mentioned psychology earlier, unless you take additional voluntary work during your degree or something like that, things to add to your resume to make you, to your CV, to make you stand out more than everybody else, you're going to be one of 200 people that's issued out into the world, into the country on that year with the exact same qualification and most probably the same sort of mark as well. So if everybody comes out on a pretty even plane education wise, then it means that to get the jobs, which there's a lot less jobs than people for high level jobs at least, or more academically inclined jobs, then it means that you need to do a lot of other stuff to stand out from the crowd. So yeah, it means that you get a lot more educated people, but it means that that doesn't necessarily mean that you end up with a stronger workforce at the end of it. Personally, I did go off and I did the PhD stuff, and that was great because it's been paid for and everything, but it was really boring as well. Most of the work, say for psychology, it doesn't matter what part of the profession you go into, there are a lot of boring parts to it, like any trade. I personally ended up going into the military for a few years because I wanted the adventure side of it. I went into the army, but that's because I enjoy that type of stuff. So I got the educational background, and I made sure that I'd got an educational backing for kind of when my body and the rest of it wasn't up to doing military type stuff, I guess you could say. Then it meant that I'd got an academic backing, I guess. I got something to fall back on. But academic stuff can be a bit boring. It doesn't matter how you dress it. So you're not necessarily always going to follow through with what you do at university. You might do a course because it sounds really good, but then at the end of it, you're not necessarily going to do anything that's even related to the field, and you're probably not going to end up using your degree again. So that means that you've done a lot of work, a lot of years of education, and you've built up quite a lot of bills, especially if you've taken out student loans for a degree that you don't always actually get to use at the end of it. So yeah, there are a lot of parts of our educational system that seem a lot better than the US version from the way that he's been describing it. But I'm not sure that we've found the right solution at the same time, because I'm not sure that the overall result between the UK and the US, I'm not sure that they really differ that much in the end result. Except perhaps the US, you end up with a lot more debt at the end of it. So that's obviously different because they're all private companies. I know that our universities are privately run, but it's still well maintained and regulated by government. So that does narrow down how much debt students are going to get in. Whereas in the US, it's a really wild roller coaster that leads to a lot of bad places in a lot of circumstances from the way I kind of seem to get it. But put into the comment section what you think about that. Do you think that I've got the right take on, and I'm explaining how UK system works versus the US, or are there things that I've got wrong? Because I'm only talking about my own experience, and that's the reason why we're doing reaction videos, because it throws up more questions.
It doesn't, I guess none of that is nothing I can control. So it's just something, one of those things that I think we definitely need to improve in the US. I think it's one reason why a lot of students do fail in the U.S. is because so many schools are underfunded because they're in areas that simply the property taxes are, the houses aren't as valuable as other areas, so the property taxes aren't as much. Makes sense, right? But yeah. Anyways, guys, enough rambling for me. Thank you so much for stopping by. I learned a lot on this video. I'm going to go back through it just to kind of pick it up again because
okay, I think he's at the end of his video, and this has turned out to be a lot longer video than I intended. But it's because there's quite a lot of stuff that's come up in this, and this is the exact reason why we've started to do these react to reaction type videos, because they do throw up more questions than anything. And I'm sure that I've probably generated even more questions, and there's a lot of things that all of you want to say, and that would be great. Put into the comments what you think about things that we've covered. What things haven't we thought about, and what things have we got wrong? Because I'm sure that there's stuff that doesn't apply to every area, and my experience doesn't speak for everybody in the UK. Everyone's going to have different experiences, and each area is going to be different. So put into the comments what your experience is like and how you think it differs. And if you're from a different country, how does your system differ from what you've been watching in this video? Okay, I'm going to leave it there because it's already a really long video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.